Today we're going to talk about Nikon's Firmware 3.0 for the Z6 and Z7 mirrorless cameras, why I think its autofocus enhancements are awesome, and I'll share some setup and control tips and tricks that'll help you get the most out of it. Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson. Welcome to Approaching the Scene. I'm here in my Portland studio, and I'm really excited to dive in and talk about my impressions of the new Nikon firmware, having used these cameras for a few years and getting a good chance to test it out pretty thoroughly over the past few weeks. Give you some ideas on how to better use your camera, take advantage of those newfound capabilities in the autofocus tracking, as well as some new ways to set up the camera. But before I do that, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about a new idea I've got to interact a little bit more with the community at large in a kind of a live back and forth way. You know, one of my absolute favorite things on the planet that I've ever done are the photo workshops out in the field and getting together with a group and talking photography and learning from each other. And having that interactive back and forth. It's the model behind this video series, Approaching the Scene, is you guys sending in questions, hitting me with emails, driving the content in the direction that the community wants to hear about, and all of us learning about the changes and new possibilities of the photographic realm and this digital photographic realm that's constantly shifting and changing. So I'm going to set up what I'm calling office hours. If you think back to days in college, on Tuesday at 10 a.m., that's where we're setting the hours right now. I'm going to have a group free meeting it's going to be a Zoom meeting. I will send you an invite if you sign up. You just have to go to my website, hudsonhenry.com/office hours. There's no hooks. There's no gimmicks. You just sign up, you get a slot. I can bring up to 100 people into this meeting. I don't know if there's going to be 2. I don't know if there's going to be 100. But this coming Tuesday, we're going to talk about shooting for the edit, about thinking out in advance about how you're going to edit the image while you're out in the field shooting, about kind of that back and forth that goes between editing and shooting and thinking about what you're going to be doing in your edit in the field. And I'll take a bunch of questions. So I'd love for you to go to the website, sign up. I'll put a link in the YouTube description, but it's easy. You just go to www.hudsonhenry.com/office hours. And I really hope that I'll see you on Tuesday. And with that, I'm going to hook up this Nikon Z7 and so that you can see what I'm doing, and I'll talk a little bit through the new autofocus enhancements in Firmware 3.0 before going through some example images and talking about different situations to use different settings, and then sharing some custom settings, menus, and control changes that I would advocate in the wake of Firmware 3.0. All right, so those of you who've been watching this channel for a while know that when the Z6 came out, I was a die-hard DSLR user. I'd tried Sony cameras and Fuji cameras and Panasonic cameras and just kept coming back to DSLRs because I didn't like the viewfinder experience and several other things. And then the Z6 really captured my imagination, particularly as a travel and landscape camera. And I wound up buying the Z7 and barely using my D500 and D850 anymore in the wake of it. One of the things that was disappointing off the bat was the inability to really do fine autofocus. I felt like they really were lacking in tracking. You know, they did a fantastic job with still subjects, getting a pinpoint autofocus in the landscape or in a still life. But when subjects were moving, the DSLRs were just better at that point. And then Nikon has come along with a series of firmware updates that have improved the autofocus every time they've done it. And over the intervening year and a half of using these cameras, I've learned that their focus is really on a different way of autofocus, using area autofocus mode, in the area modes. And so this new update improves that experience even further, and I've found that I'm getting really great results. Now, if I was going on a trip to specifically shoot birds in flight or a football game from the sideline where there's action moving past me fast right in front of me or way out in the distance where, you know, I'm framing something up and it's coming at me, I'd probably still take my D500 because of its faster frame rate of 20 frames a second, its bigger buffer of 200 frames, its APS-C sensor that crops in and gives me even more reach with a long lens or a long zoom lens, and its group area autofocus mode that really does a fantastic job picking up the subject really quick and tracking it wherever it happens to be in the frame, whether it's far away or whether it's close. You know, that's something that I think Nikon's still working towards with the mirrorless system, but it's getting closer and closer with every bit of firmware. And this one brings it up to speed. Actually, the one before this brought it to the point where I wasn't bringing DSLRs on trips with me anymore, unless those trips were specifically wildlife focused. And I'll share why here. So let's talk about the autofocus modes. I have my camera set up so that when I'm in stills mode, when I have the lever switched from video to stills, the video record button lets me change autofocus modes. And I have a whole setup video on customizing your Z6 and Z7 controls. So, you know, if you haven't checked that out, just making sure I'm recording my camera here. And I always get questions. I'm recording it to an Atomus Ninja 5 under my desk via HDMI. It just records the screen or the viewfinder while I'm working with it. So I can share with you what I'm talking about. If I hit that button, and I'm going to go ahead, pull off my eye cup to just get a little bit better view here and put on my reading glasses so I can see a little bit better. And if I go ahead and hit the video record button, it brings up different modes of autofocus. So right now I'm in kind of my general landscape setting, or my general just sort of shooting around in mixed light setting. And I've got autofocus single servo. I think of that as static. AFS is for static. It means single servo, but it means you're locking focus on a fixed subject, say a landscape or a still life that's not moving. When I want to track motion, I go into AFC. And to do that, I've got this set up, so all I have to do is hit that video record button and dial the back dial. Now, for you to go in and change your settings like mine, I got that video. It's a step-by-step through the menus, and I'm putting the link in the YouTube description. Just under the video, click Show More. The front dial changes modes. So the back dial is AFC for continuous autofocus, manual focus where you want to do it all yourself, maybe in the landscape. Autofocus single servo for those still subjects that aren't moving, and then continuous. We're going to focus solely on continuous here. And then there are the area modes. How are you choosing how to focus? And I'm going to say to you that this new Firmware 3.0, one of the biggest things it does is really dramatically improves the dynamic area autofocus. That's this mode right here, where you've got a little, focusing pinpoint with 9 dots around it, or actually 8 dots around it, that create a larger box. And you just need your subject to be in that box. You can set up where you want them to come into the frame. So you're photographing a racetrack and you want to pick up the car, moving left to right and keep it on the left side of the frame, or a runner or a bird. So you can choose where you want to pick up the subject. And then when you hit the AF on button on the back, I'm a big back button focus person. You hit the AF on button on the back, it'll track while you keep that point over your subject and move through the frame. It's very similar to the DSLR's performance with this. It's a lot like dynamic area focus with the DSLRs, and it works really well. I think it's kind of a legacy mode. They've improved the legacy mode because so many people were using it out of habit with the DSLRs, and it really was terrible in its first iteration. Where Nikon is focusing for the future, though, and the future of this whole autofocus system, to my mind, is actually when you flip it and you go into auto area autofocus. That's that little square with the brackets around it, or the rectangle with the brackets around it. In this mode, when you're in your settings and you select that you want eye detect and face detect autofocus to be active, it'll automatically pick up on people's faces, and then when it sees eyes, it'll automatically pick up on eyes. And now with Firmware 3.0, you can flip it into animal eye detect, which will automatically be looking for dogs and cats instead of people. I haven't used that much. There's videos out there about it. I think it works just fine. I've noticed it work with cats and with birds in the human eye detect mode. So that's not such a big deal to me. I think that the face and eye detect is something that I just always leave turned on in the auto area mode because it works so well. And the minute you're photographing a person and it sees their face, boom, it locks it. And if there's multiple people, you can switch face to face. If there's multiple eyes, you can switch eye to eye just by hitting the left and right parts of your D-pad back here and choosing one eye over another eye, flipping back and forth. And as long as you hold down the autofocus on button, it's going to keep that eye or that face in nice razor sharp focus. And it does a great job of that. Now, it's also an incredible mode to mimic what we would use DSLR Nikons for in the group autofocus mode. And that mode is for if you're photographing birds in flight or players coming by you really fast on the field, you know, some kind of action that's erratic, unpredictable, it could happen in front of you quickly. You need to pick it up and catch it and move with it. A big group of points working to find that subject and keep it focused throughout the frame. It works really, really well in Nikon's DSLRs. And in that scenario, the auto area autofocus without selecting a point, not having an eye, not having a face, it works amazingly if you have motion coming through your frame and you're tracking it with the camera and your subject's moving at the same rate that you're moving the camera, it will recognize that subject. Doesn't matter how far it is from you, it's not going for the closest thing, it's going for the thing that's moving at the same rate you're panning the camera. And it will lock and keep it locked in the frame. It's great for birds in flight that are close to you. The problem, and where it suffers a little bit, is when there's, say, action slowly moving towards you in a wider scene, smaller in the frame, it doesn't know necessarily what that action is. You know, what's the important subject to you? What is it the background or is it the thing moving? And which one of the things moving is it? And so Nikon's added this mode that you could do. Now, traditionally before firmware 3.0, you had to hit the OK button in the middle of the D-pad. You press the OK button, up comes this subject tracking box. And you could move that around just like you can in dynamic area autofocus. And then you hit the autofocus button, it activates and it's going to track whatever it's over in the frame. I'm leaving my frame black here to just not be a bunch of carpet in my studio, but I can show you some examples of it locking in the field and tracking a subject as you move around until you let off the autofocus button and it goes back to the position that you asked to pick up subjects. To get rid of it, in the past you had to hit the zoom out button down here at the bottom of the camera. Kind of a little bit of pain moving your thumb around. Well, one of the things they did in firmware 3.0 is set it up so that you can activate that tracking square or deactivate it with the function buttons. You can customize a button to do that. I like the function 2 button down here, your sort of ring finger of the right hand if you wore a wedding ring on the right hand. So your third finger there, just right underneath the depth of field preview. And that is a button that in my normal scheme of working in the landscape or just running around not shooting action, I would use for bracketing. I'm in a high contrast scene, I hit that button and that's going to bring up bracketing. I can switch whether I want with the front dial how many stops I want to bracket apart, with the back dial whether I want 2 frames, 1 on the meter, 1 underexposed. I want to turn it off by putting 0 frames, 3 frames, 1 over, 1 under, 5 frames, whatever. It lets me control that with a simple turn of the front and back dial while I hold my finger in on that button, which lets me not even take my eye out of the viewfinder when I'm working handheld. It's awesome. But I'm going to show you how you can set that up with using a user button so that just when you're using that auto area autofocus for action, you're not going to be bracketing in action scenes anyway. So we'll just flip that button from bracketing to the tracking, subject tracking. I'll show you how to do that at the end of this video. So in general, the great thing about this new auto area is the sensor, the technology. It's recognizing subjects moving across the sensor, picking them up, using that computer processing power to track things instead of having sort of a rangefinder system, a legacy system. And that's definitely the future. That auto area autofocus works better and better with every single iteration of the firmware. And I'm sure that it's going to be even better yet with the new bodies that come next. Now, given the national crisis or the worldwide crisis with the virus and supply chain disruptions, who knows how long that's going to be, but these cameras are really good now. Again, I'm taking trips and workshop trips where it's the only bodies I'm taking are the Z6 and Z7. I'm not bringing DSLRs. If I was going to Africa or the jungles of Costa Rica to photograph wildlife, or if I was invited to photograph a high school football game or a college football game, I would bring the DSLR for the reasons I stated earlier. But I'm telling you, this is getting closer and closer, and it's darn near there already, and it really is working well. Let me show you some images to kind of highlight that before I go through settings. So these are from Kauai, up at the lighthouse on the North Shore. And the Kilauea Lighthouse, you can see that in that auto area autofocus, I don't even need to pick a point. If I'm tracking this bird in its flight, not so far from me, I think I was mostly using my 500 PF lens for this work. And these images are all straight out of the camera, no processing at all. So they're not like portfolio images. I've done nothing. These are just straight out of the camera. you can see it's just doing a fantastic job keeping these birds razor sharp. And it doesn't matter if they pass in front of or behind other subjects, if another bird comes into the frame, if they, they're just phenomenal. And it's letting me get just, incredibly sharp images. Oops, I jumped into that's a Lightroom oddity there. You get the idea. Nice and sharp, razor sharp. And it's, it's letting me, by tracking them with that auto area, I don't even have to worry about where I put the point. If the camera's moving with them, it keeps them locked in, it recognizes them in the subject. And I was just really, really happy with my results out there. Now, here's the situation when you're trying to track when you're photographing a bird and it's not moving that much in the background and you try to pick it up. My camera's moved very little here. It doesn't know if I want the surface of the ocean or the bird. Same thing here. That's where you're going to activate that subject tracking mode. And you're going to just hit your finger and put the box on your subject and start tracking it. It's a little bit further away. Another thing that you might use that for is if you're photographing from a distance and there are a number of birds moving around and there's one in particular that you want to focus on, or a number of animals or people, and you want to focus on that one, you can put that little box on it. And another thing that's cool is you can actually hit the OK button and it'll lock on that subject, and you don't even have to hold the AF button down. It won't keep focusing on it unless you hold the AF button down, but it'll keep tracking it until you hit the OK button again. So it just locks that on the subject. But I tend to leave it in a position on the frame and just hold the autofocus button on down. I'm usually looking through the viewfinder while I do that, and it works really, really well. All right. Another problem, if you're using the auto area autofocus and you don't have a subject tracking, and you do have a subject tracking point selected, or you're using dynamic area and suddenly there's erratic moving motion close to you, you're trying to pick it up really fast, especially using a long lens, it's not as good at picking up that motion just by tracking along with it. This is where I was using dynamic area autofocus, but it would be the same if I had the subject tracking box and you don't just nail it with the subject tracking box as that fast moving bird moves through. You really want to have auto area autofocus with no point selected and just move the camera with the subject and you'll find it autofocuses really fantastic. Now, if you've got people in your scene, here's my little girl Pepper, on the playground before we stopped taking them to the playground to avoid germs from other kids. It just sees her eye. It's going to automatically, when you have a person walk into the frame, go straight to their eye. And if both their eyes are in the frame, it'll have a little arrow. If you're on the right eye, it can move to the left eye. If there's another person standing next to them, it can move to the next person's eye, to their other eye, to the next person. You just use the D-pad left and right to switch which eye you want in focus, and it'll track that eye and keep it razor sharp. If it loses the eye, it'll still recognize the face. You have face detect on, so it's still going to be recognizing her face. Even in a shallow depth of field shot like this, it knows that it's her face and eye that's the important thing to me. Coming down the slide, it's locked on her eye, even in a shallow depth of field shot like this. It's easy to pick up a face or an eye. You don't have to select it. The camera sees it, and all you do is hit autofocus. You hit the AF on button, and it is gonna nail those eyes. It's so much fun. It's just, that's the future. That's why the auto area autofocus is where it's all headed. My boy Pike is just starting to really kill it with riding his bike and his pedal bike. And so I set up to show you, this is the kind of situation where he's coming towards me and I'm not moving the camera so much that it's going to be better to be tracking him with the subject tracking turned on. That auto area autofocus with the little box, put it on him, hold down the autofocus button, and it's just going to lock on him as he moves through the scene and you keep him focused. It's going to stay with him even though you're not moving the camera much. But the minute that he comes too close, it's liable to lose him in that mode. You need to turn off that box and just pan and hold autofocus down and it'll pick it up. So, and to illustrate that, I handed the Z6, which I'm filming this with right now, to my wife Stacy, And I went up the hill with him, and all I told her was, wait till he's right here at this focal length, and as you have to pan by, don't pick a spot or anything, just hold down the autofocus, keep him in the frame, and hold down the shutter in continuous frame mode. And so, you know, we ran by, she got to practice it as we went by. I'm helping him get up the hill. And then as he came down, you can see, I mean, it's just nailing it. And as he came down, that's where she activated it. And you can see just, you know, well, here's where she really activated it and laid it down. It's doing an awesome job just keeping him nice and sharp. So it's really, really fun to use this mode. And if you guys were watching back when I was originally reviewing the mirrorless autofocus and I was really panning its ability to track and just saying I hadn't really run into any mirrorless cameras at that point that were tracking that well. This is a while back. One of my big tests is whether or not it can track a child's face on the swing set coming at you and back. Here's Pepper on the swing set. And in the past, this camera's had a hard time with getting, you know, a high hit rate. It'll get a few in focus, but usually the one that you just love isn't quite right. Well, I think you can see it's pretty much nailing it now with the firmware 3.0. All right, so you can hear my exuberance. I'm really, really happy with how this has improved in each iteration, and this latest one really is a dramatic improvement. Now, one of the other things that I mentioned earlier is they set it up so that subject tracking can be activated. That little box in auto area autofocus can be activated with the function 2 button. Now, that's not a button I want to take away from bracketing when I'm working in the landscape or out just shooting travel pictures and I get into that high contrast scene and I want to capture an underexposed frame. I want that at my fingertips, super simple. Don't want to have to dive into the menus. So I'm going to use one of my user settings and I'm going to show you how I do that right now. So make sure I'm still recording all this. I am. All right, so I'm going to go in. I'm going to throw on my reading glasses so I can see what I'm doing. And right now, I'm in aperture priority mode. I want to go to shutter priority mode because we're setting up a sports and action mode here, and I'm going to want shutter priority. In shutter priority, I want auto ISO for sports and action. And actually, you know what? I want to do one thing first. Before I go changing settings to program into a user mode, I've got my camera set up like I like it right now, and I don't want to lose that state. So I'm going to go in here. I'm in the far left of my menus. If I go down to the wrench and I scroll over to the right, it's down here towards the bottom. And if you're up at the top, just go up and it'll take you to the bottom. And you go into save and load settings, and I want to save my settings. Boop, okay? The green light's going to light, it's going to save your settings to your memory card. If I want to reload them, the ones I just saved will get reloaded when I hit load settings. So it's like putting a bookmark. I want my camera set up like it is right now, remembered. Okay. So that's remembered. Now we can go in and tweak things and get back without worrying. All right. So I'm going to go in. My camera's set up how I've shown in my setup guide. Again, that's linked in the YouTube description. In my eye menu, I've got noise reduction off. That's fine. We don't need any long exposure noise reduction for action. I've got vibration reduction turned on right now. Exposure delay mode's turned off. I'm shooting RAW plus JPEG. I think that's all fine. I want to be in autofocus continuous focus mode. I want to be in auto area autofocus mode. There it is, that rectangle with the brackets around it. That's all set. So we're good there. I don't need to change anything. I want to go just check some of my other settings really fast. I'm going to go into my menu. I'm going to go up into custom settings and just look through my autofocus settings. I've got AFC priority selection shutter. And what that means is the release, it means that it's going to prioritize taking the picture exactly when I push the shutter over having it in perfect focus. I'm shooting action. I don't want it to stall because it doesn't feel like things are in perfect focus. If I'm shooting landscapes and I'm in AFS mode and I'm doing autofocus in the landscape, I'd rather have it prioritize getting the focus perfect. But in this case, I'm shooting in autofocus continuous mode and I want release. I'm going to go, all this stuff. I have the tracking set to not change autofocus based on something coming between me and my subject to just being a little bit more delayed than the middle. I like 4. That's the mode I'm finding I like a lot. I want auto area, auto face autofocus face, eye detection, both turned on. Face and eye detection. If you want to shoot animals, you can flip it to animals here, but by default, I want face and eye detection for people, for me personally. With the Z7, I like to use half of the focus points because there are so many, there's 400 and some, and it just takes too long to scroll through them. With the Z6, I like to use them all, there's half as many. Store points by orientation. That means that if I'm shooting in portrait mode and I have selected where I want the focus to be, it'll remember that. If I'm shooting horizontally, it'll remember that. And if I flip back, it goes back to where it was when I was shooting vertically. That's a nice mode. AF activation off. That's how you get your, AF on only. I don't want it on the shutter. That's how you get out of having the shutter button have focus. No for focusing with the shutter button for me. I just don't think it makes sense in any situation. And you can limit your autofocus area mode selections if you want. Focus point wraparound, that's something where if you go off to the right, the focus point comes up on the left. I don't use that, it seems confusing to me. Low light autofocus, I'm actually gonna turn that off for sports and action. I definitely want it on by default when I'm shooting in low light and landscapes, things like that, but not for sports and action. That slows down the focus. If it gets low light, I'd rather be able to do quick focusing in fast action situations than slow it down. And I usually leave the AF Assist illuminator on. So those are my kind of autofocus settings that are locked in. Let's go down to controls. This is where we're gonna really change something that's meaningful. We're gonna go to custom control assignment, F2, and we go in here and instead of function 2 button controlling bracketing, we're gonna run down here, and it's a ways down. I wanna change that to, there it is, subject tracking, boom. Now all of a sudden, we put what we wanted on the function 2 button. So now I'm gonna come back out of here. Oh, I think I have to hit menu to get out of here. And I wanna go out of custom settings, back into the wrench menu, and now I'm down near the bottom. I'm gonna scroll down to go to the top. That kind of wraparound thing. I'm up at the top now, and I want to come down to Save User Settings, and I'm going to go ahead and save this to User 3, and all I have to do is hit the button to save settings, and it's saved to the User 3 settings. So now, if I go ahead, hit my shutter button, come out of the menus, oh, well, one more thing. Now that I've done that, let's not forget, I'm going to go back to the top of the setup menu, and I'm going to go to Save and Load Settings, and let's load settings again. So now, if I go back into aperture priority like I was running around travel shooting, and I go ahead and hit my function 2 button, I still have my bracketing. It's my bracketing controls are on the command wheels with touching with my ring finger. Now, if I decide to flip it into U3, I'm suddenly in shutter priority, 1/1600th of a second. Vibration reduction is on, AFC, I've got auto area, autofocus, and if I hit the button, boom, there's my point. I hit my shutter, or I hit my AF on button, it activates, I let off, it goes right back. If I move it over, because I want to pick up something on the left side of the frame, hit my button, let go, it goes right back to where I set it, boom. And if I touch the function 2 button again, it disappears so that I can track things that I don't want to have that activated. Something quick and erratic is happening right in front of me. Well, now all of a sudden you've got the keys to the castle for the auto area autofocus system dialed in and at your fingertips. Really simple to use. So hope that helps. Those of you who are having fun with the Z6, Z7, I hope that, hit me up, tell me if you like it, tell me if you don't like this idea. Tell me your experience with the autofocus. Tell me what else you'd like to hear about in approaching the scene. And by all means, sign up for those office hours. I've got that coming this Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific for an hour. We're going to talk about shooting for the edit and any Q&A that the people that show up want to have. You just go to hudsonhenry.com/office hours. Easy to sign up, no strings attached. I hope to see you Tuesday morning. Thanks so much, everybody. And everybody stay well, stay safe out there. Maintain that sort of, we can all maintain that distance from each other that we need to be safe right now while still editing, still shooting in spaces that don't have crowds of people or surfaces that other people are touching. I'm thinking the mountains, the woods, the beaches that are more deserted, a little less people. Maybe it's time to get out there a little bit and spend time with that core knit family and catch up on that backlog of editing. So tell me what you guys are doing. Link up with me Tuesday, and I hope to see you then.